Revelation 2764. From the 2nd and the 4th June 1943. The essence of creation is love. Nothing became the world. This is a secret that remains undisclosed to the human being who is unawakened in spirit. There was nothing but God's will, and it gave rise to everything that presents itself to the human senses as a visible work of creation in the vast universe. God's will and His power accomplished the miracle of creation. Yet both God's will and God's power are incomprehensible to the human being on earth as long as he himself is powerless and weak-willed because he is far from God. Only closeness to God brings him this realization. Only closeness to God is able to make the nature of God comprehensible to him, and only then does he understand that everything has emerged from God's power and will. And this creating power is a being which is capable of thinking and, through its will, lets its thoughts become form. It requires nothing but the will alone is sufficient for something to come into being which did not exist before. The creating power, which identifies itself as an entity through its will, is therefore the source of inexhaustible strength, for since new creations constantly arise, a power has to bring about those which the will determined to take on this or that form. And since the will is paired with unsurpassable wisdom, the creations must be exceedingly meaningful both in their nature and in their purpose. They must serve a purpose, since the wise creative power lets nothing come into being without thought. This creative power must therefore be recognized in everything that surrounds the human being. For it cannot be denied, otherwise no thing would exist that is. But whether the Creator's wisdom is recognized depends on the human being's will to penetrate into deeper knowledge. He has to observe what is happening around him. He has to use his intellect in the right way. He has to direct his thoughts towards the eternal Creator so that the strength will also flow into him, so that he will recognize the purposefulness of what surrounds him. He can only recognize God's wisdom if he delves deeper into the individual works of creation, if he seeks to fathom their purpose, thus desires information about what underlies the emergence of this creation. But this knowledge can only be imparted to the human being whose spirit can become effective in him. And to him God's might and power, His will and His wisdom also become apparent, and now also His greater than great love, which is the original cause of the whole of creation. Thus love is the original substance of every work of creation which, although it is not matter in itself, becomes matter through God's will. Love is spiritual strength. It is not something material but something ethereal, of which the human being as such cannot yet have any idea. Love is the essence and therefore also the original substance of creation, just as the essence of the eternal deity itself is love. Creation is therefore the emanation of eternal love and thus of an inconceivable power that is capable of bringing about everything. Man and everything visible around him is this strength in its grossest form, that is, it emanated from God ages ago, it lost itself in infinity, it strove towards God's opposite pole. The strength which, as a primordially created spirit with free will too, adjusted itself negatively to God, and thereby lost its original nature. It aligned itself with the will of God's adversary and, in order to regain its original nature, was used to create everything that is visible to man. And this possibility of transformation is the purpose and goal of the whole of creation, that the power which has gone out from God finds its way back to God again. The power of God is building up and shaping, the power of his adversary is removing and destroying. Through his will God can let the power emanating from him become form. And he does this because his nature is deepest love and wisdom. God's adversary only needs his strength to separate what belongs to God from him, to destroy the divine order, because his strength, which originally was also love, has changed into the opposite through his will, into perverse love for himself and hatred for everything outside of him. His love seeks to turn towards everything that comes forth from God in order to increase his strength, but he does not turn towards what he desires in love but seeks to destroy it. And since love alone is the original cause of every work of creation, God's adversary can never let visible creations arise, for only the perfect, which is completely one with God, is entitled to this power. But God's adversary has deprived himself of this power through his will turned against God, because he thereby lost love, the strength through which all things come into being. And he will never ever be in full possession of power if he lacks love, which is of divine origin, for love turns the spiritual being into a God-like being which can create and shape according to its will, which will always also be the will of God. Amen.